Hi there, welcome back. This is Casey, and in today's video I would like to share with you some of the plants. We're just going to introduce an array of plants that best affect the reproductive system of both the male and female human. And we're going to sort of go through some categories. If you haven't watched the last video on the placement of the reproductive system as seen in the iris, you may want to do that, or if you're just here to learn about these botanicals, that's fine also. So I have a couple of collages of a number of different plants, and keep in mind that we're looking at phytohormones primarily. So that would be the plants that contain hormones as biological living entities that may relate to, correspond to, activate also the human being. So within the plant, they have produced hormones for similar reasons that humans produce hormones, and that is for growth, protection, even stress management, against all sorts of environmental factors, as well as their own reproductive cycle. So we'll see that some of these plants especially relate to both male and female reproductive cycles in different ways and different aspects, and some will affect the hormones directly and as they contain phytohormones, and then some others will have some more complicated processes that we'll look at. So first I wanted to just sort of introduce the plants that we're going to be looking at, and I wanted to see if anyone would be able to discern or guess the difference between, I have two different collages, and so this is the first one. So take a look at these plants, and then we're going to show you the next one. And so what would be your best guess as to which collage would be representing which male or female? So this one and this one. All right, so I will just tell you, and I will also say that between the two, we all have, so the females have all of the hormones. So we're looking at estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, just in much different quantities. So we have, as females, we have very little testosterone, and as in the male, they have very little estrogen, and then with varying degrees of progesterone. So this collage here, you can see with the more feminine, and this is, you're going to start to notice just basically the signature of plants and the energy that is reflected within their physical characteristics. And you can see that this is a little bit more feminine, not just with the colors, but with the shapes and just the feel. And also you're going to see that we have a lot of purples and whites and even pinks. Rose would probably go in this category, but I have had to omit it. So this would be the female reproductive plants, and we're going to go through those, and then this would be more, and you can see here we have just much more in the yellow color, in the more sharp and serrated and pointed and arrow-like shapes, and also with the ashwagandha and the red berry, with the pine and the pine cone. You can see that we have a bit more of a male signature. So a lot of crossover is going to be taking place. So a lot of the plants we're going to be looking at, for instance, let me just go ahead and start drawing these in. So for instance, we have Damiana here. And Damiana is, as you can see, and I will go into more about plant characteristics and how you would say that plant may look like more of a male plant and that plant may look like more of a female plant. And there is a little bit behind that, and a lot of it's intuitive as well. But with the yellow, for instance, that is the solar plexus. That is fire, and the element of fire, and this is how I attribute plant sex, if you will, is through their elements. And that usually does translate into how our ancestors also attributed plant qualities and even planetary assignments. So with Damiana, you can see with the yellow flower, this is the solar plexus, this is the element of fire. Fire is a masculine element, and this is more suited to, slightly more suited to the male reproductive system, but very well tuned into also the female reproductive system as an aphrodisiac. So we're going to be looking at, I mean, the best way for me to break this down is through sort of categories. And so we'll have aphrodisiac plants, and we'll have plants that affect the masculine or male sexual impulse, and as well the female. And we will also have plants that are related to fertility and in both sexes, and we'll have plants that are related to just overall like tropho restorative plants, which are related to the nutrition, so feeding the nutrition to the organs and glands related to the reproductive system and coming into balance in that way. So we're also going to be looking at different disorders related to the female cycle. And yeah, so all through the life stages on both sides, women and men. And it will be interesting to see that a lot of these plants, while they really hold the signature of male or female, they both do apply to the male and the female for the most part. There are some plants that are just straight up men's herbs, and likewise that's true for women. So we're starting here. I just want to basically introduce, I'm just going to put names to these faces, and then in today's video we're going to be talking about saw palmetto. And so with saw palmetto, as well as chase tree berry or vitex berry, and that is on the next screen in the female herbs, we're looking at two berries which very much correlate to, correspond to, and interact with directly the pituitary gland. And so it is this interplay between the pituitary gland, which is receiving its guidance or direction, if you will, from the hypothalamus, that is sending out hormones and precursor hormones and signals for other glands in the body to be producing their own specific hormones. And so it really is in the pituitary gland that you're looking at the source for a lot of different aspects of health in the body, but especially it is true also with the reproductive system. So I thought that it would be appropriate to start with those two plants. And saw palmetto, so we're going to get right into that in just a minute. Saw palmetto is an incredible medicinal plant, and let me just go ahead and show you. This is saw palmetto berry, and I have a collage where we will look at this plant in more detail. And you can see right away, though, its signature with these dark almost black, but they are sort of a maroon, like blood colored berry, and they very much do correspond to, and the likeness especially, of the pituitary gland. And the same is true with the vitex or the chaste tree berry. But if I had to choose one plant that was the sort of visual and just embodiment in every way of the pituitary gland, and you can see its effects in many different ways, not just in sexual health and vitality, but in other systems in the body. It is primarily geared, though, to the reproductive system, and saw palmetto is well known for its ability to benefit those with BPH, or benign prostatic hyperplasia. So that's something to be taking into account here as we look at men going into their 40s and 50s and 60s, 70s. Like most men, when they're into their 70s and 80s, will be experiencing this condition. So it's an excellent plant to be taking at any time prior to that. And as well, saw palmetto in its anti-androgenic properties is proven to benefit many different aspects of male sexuality, and as well female sexuality. So we have a lot of research with this. It's been used for erectile dysfunction. It is something of an aphrodisiac. And in its anti-androgenic qualities, we also have benefits for the female. And as such, it is used for underdeveloped breasts. And so we're looking here, if you think about the function of the pituitary gland, one of those functions is in the growth hormone. And so if you have something that has gone awry and you have underdeveloped sexual secondary characteristics such as the breasts, saw palmetto can and has been known to correct that. So there's an array of different benefits and things that we'll get into. I have some research to talk about with saw palmetto, but and it's a safe plant, so it is considered a nutritive plant. And the taste, I mean, we'll talk about it, but just in terms of how you would want to be consuming this herb, I would probably recommend either a capsule or a tincture, unless it's in a low quantity in an herbal compound. But let's get into that in just a minute. I want to just quickly draw in the names. So we're going to be looking at ashwagandha, saw palmetto. We're going to be looking at nettle. And here again, just as a reminder, we are primarily looking at more male prominent features of plants, although there is a lot of crossover. And we're going to be looking at pine. And in this case, it will be pine pollen, which is known for its content of DHEA, which is a precursor to both estrogen and testosterone. Pine pollen, and you can see from the signature, and it's a pollen, right? So it's a little bit more male oriented, but I do think it's beneficial to women as well. And then we're going to be looking at this Ayurvedic plant, mucuna. And as well, we're going to be looking at tribulus, pretty well known aphrodisiac. A lot of these are used for erectile dysfunction. And, you know, in men, yes, it is an issue of testosterone a lot of times, especially in men that are into their 40s and beyond. You know, just supplementing testosterone or blocking certain effects that are having a negative effect on the production of testosterone can be beneficial. But in men and women, testosterone is an aphrodisiac, so it directly relates to healthy sexuality. Okay, and then so we saw Damiana, and Damiana definitely in that same category. It's funny that all these three plants here on the right have similar, they're pretty similar with their flowers and the color. Damiana is more of a circulatory stimulant, so it brings circulation to the sexual organs, and that is the effect that it has on improving sexuality or sexual impulse. And then the last one is epimedium. And yeah, so we're going to go through all of these, probably one or two at a time, and discuss their effects on sexual health, and we'll talk about the different dysfunctions that some men may experience and how these plants can benefit that. And then, so for the female reproductive system, again, some of these plants will cross over. I would say, just because of what I just mentioned about testosterone, more of the male plants will cross over perhaps into benefiting the female. So for instance, plants like black cohosh. I'm not sure of what historical, and I haven't researched it completely, fully 100% yet, but I'm not sure of what historical relationship that black cohosh may have with men, but certainly it's a plant that is well known for women. And especially, so we're talking about different life cycles and levels of estrogen. Black cohosh would be more considered a phytoestrogen, and so would be more useful, especially in mid to later life for females. And then likewise raspberry, and I have included this picture. So we would have this beautiful pink berry, and when we get into raspberry, I will show you the very significant likeness to certain female anatomy of the reproductive system. So we have raspberry fruit and leaves that we're going to be talking about, but this is the flower, so I thought I would just put the flower in because it's white, like so many of these plants. And then we also, and again, raspberry is very much known as a female herb. It can be used to strengthen and tonify the male reproductive system as well, but it's very much specific to the uterus. And it is a nutritive plant, and you can take it in teas and infusions, so you don't have to worry about the amount you take of raspberry. So, and then below that we have shatavari. So shatavari, this is an Ayurvedic plant. It is translates to one with 100 husbands. So it is again a phytoestrogen plant, and so we're going to talk about the phytoestrogen plants because they're not always going to increase estrogen within the body, which is something we really want to be looking out for if you have an estrogen dominance, which many women do. So it can actually have a reverse effect. It can actually benefit estrogen dominance in the way that it binds to the estrogen receptor sites. So we'll talk about that. So that's Shatavari. And then with ashwagandha, actually, that's also, it's actually ashwagandha. So let me just go back here. It is also an Ayurvedic plant, and I don't consider it primarily to be solely a plant related to the reproductive system. I actually consider ashwagandha more of an adaptogen. And for myself, I use ashwagandha quite a lot. And I feel like its effects on women and men, and it depends on the hormone, like what kind of hormone composition that you have in your body, what kind of balances and imbalances that you may have. But I wanted to bring it back because it translates to, from Sanskrit, the smell and or power of a horse. So it imbues a sense of strength, and that does also correlate to reproductive strength and power. Okay, so have Shatavari and then ashwagandha. Those are definitely sort of a duo. And then also with wild yam, they are included in quite a lot of Ayurvedic formulas, and as well as dong quai. So dong quai is angelica, essentially, and it is the Chinese version of angelica. So there are slight differences in these two, I guess just, you know, the American grown angelica and then the Eastern grown angelica. So our dong quai would be angelica. It doesn't mean that we won't be including dong quai itself. This photo is actually, I mean, you can't really tell the difference between the flowers. So we have the Angelica synthesis, and then we have the Archangelica. So, and that the root is used with that plant. And then below that we have the Vitex. And as mentioned, this and the saw palmetto berry Vitex, this will turn into a berry. I've just included the flower because it's pretty, but when we get to it, I'll show you the berry itself. It also can be, and I know like with Dr. Morse's formulas, he has in, I think, all of his reproductive formulas and all of his endocrine formulas, I don't want to say every single one, but I do believe, especially with saw palmetto, you're going to see that in pretty much all of those formulas. Anything related to the endocrine system is going to be related to the pituitary gland, and that's going to equal saw palmetto. And as well, he has Vitex in a lot of those formulas. So we have Vitex, also known as chaste tree berry, although it doesn't always give that effect of chastity, so we'll talk about that. And then below that, we have our wild yam, which, and you're really looking for, especially in these times, and just where we found ourselves in terms of the abundance and the toxicity and the, I don't know, a lot of people have a pretty major estrogen dominance, a lot of women do, and that is, you know, an acidic condition, and it contributes to a lot of like dysmenorrhea, any kind of cyclical period challenges with your cycle can be resolved through adding a progesterone type of plant. And wild yam, along with Vitex, can also be phytoprogesterone. And so they are definitely sacred plants, very valuable to women and men, because, you know, as testosterone and estrogen are more acidic, progesterone is more alkaline. Okay, and then we have the white peony, and the root is used with that. And then we also have fenugreek, and you'll see that there is some research literature related to fenugreek and the male reproductive system, but from what I've seen with fenugreek, it's more, it's definitely, certainly a galactagogue, so it will increase breast milk and quality and quantity of breast milk. And so that would be a good one, actually, when we're speaking about the breasts, and back to saw palmetto and underdeveloped female anatomy. You would also maybe think about including fenugreek if you're looking at trying to remedy some sort of situation of underdeveloped breasts. And we'll talk more about that when we get there. And then we have alfalfa. Which I would consider a little bit more of a tropho-restorative. It does have some phytohormone qualities to it. I would also consider alfalfa, especially because of its signature, because of the color. We're looking at the pituitary gland. So, and you can see with the alfalfa, with the vitex, and with the dark purple color of the saw palmetto berry, we're looking at a direct connection to the pituitary gland, which is the crown chakra. So alfalfa will come into play, and especially as it relates to the pituitary gland. And then the last one here for female hormone, phytohormones, would be clover. And again, you see with clover, and clover is known, it's a little bit more complicated than what you might just hear out on the street. It has a reputation as a phytoestrogen, but it's definitely more involved in that. What you're going to see with all of these phytoestrogen, phytotestosterone, you know, DHA, DHEA, is that it really, really depends on the body. It depends. I mean, some of these plants are introducing hormones into the body directly. Some are assisting the body in sort of locking into the receptor sites so that other synthetic and just troublesome toxins can't lock onto that site. So with clover, it is considered a phytoestrogen, but we'll talk about clover in more detail when we get there. All right, so before we go into saw palmetto, I will say we're going to put together a couple of formulas, and just this in and of itself, this collage might be a nice formula for women, for sure. But I would also, and I do have a few formulas that I have created, I would also really like to include any kind of female formula, especially when you are working on building the strength of the reproductive system and you're looking at sexuality and reproductive health. I would also like to include Damiana, and as well as saw palmetto. And again, nettle can be an incredible nutritive for the female, while nettle is more specific of a reproductive plant for men. So it's nutritive for both sexes, but for men, we're looking again at a plant that addresses the BPH, any kind of prostatitis, and we're looking at the root of nettle and the flowers and seeds of nettle in that instance. But the leaves of nettle are beneficial to both sexes. Okay, so when we do our formulas, we'll probably be sort of mixing and mashing a bit, and as well as with pine pollen, even though it is more masculine, I really like to include that in some of the female formulas that I do for people. So let us get right into it, and we're going to go straight to the saw palmetto. Alright, so here we have our saw palmetto, and I'd just like to take a moment and look at the signature of this plant with you, and we can see from its fan-like properties, it does not have a lot of water content, so we don't have these thick, watery, succulent leaves. We have very thin, dry leaves, and that gives this plant an aspect of the element of air, as well as it is in literal blades. And so, especially like when you look at, I mean, a lot of different archetypal images and concepts, when you see something like blades or swords, especially in the tarot, that is going to be related to the element of air. And as mentioned, air is a masculine quality. So we already have some masculine qualities coming through. And then you can see in the lower left, we have this leaf that is spiky. So that is where the saw comes into in terms of the name. So we have spikes, little spikes on the leaves. And we also have a plant that is virtually trunkless. So while it does have a trunk, it is short and small, and it's mostly these fans. And you can see in this picture over here on the right that saw palmetto does tend to grow in these little groves. I believe this picture is from Florida, from the Everglades. So saw palmetto is native to the southern US, all the way from Southern California to the Florida Everglades. I've seen pictures also of plants from Georgia. And this plant you can see in the flower just above the, enlarge this a little bit, so you can see in the flower that we have a little bit of yellow coming through. And it's interesting because we were just looking at that male reproductive herb collage, and there's a lot of yellow. So again, we have fire, and we have the solar plexus, and we have another element of the masculine. So these beautiful star-like flowers turn into these gorgeous berries that start out as green and then progress through these different shades of red, burgundy, into the deeper purples, and very much representing the pituitary gland in the sense that it is related to the crown chakra. Okay, so let me go ahead and backtrack just a minute. So this plant can come up for anything related to the pituitary gland. So if you're an iridologist, if you are studying natural health, if you're looking at, any kind of disorders, a lot of those are going to lead back to the pituitary gland, for which this plant would be useful. So let's just go back and we'll look at our iridology chart first. Here we have so we have the pituitary gland that sits posterior to the hypothalamus. You can see that intimate connection that the pituitary gland has to the hypothalamus, and as such you can see that there is a sort of interplay, interaction, interweaving of the nervous system to the glandular system. And so that just even that in and of itself is a remarkable feature, that we have the nervous system interacting with and basically being the command center for the endocrine system. So here we have the pituitary gland as it is located in the brain, and then let's look also at the pituitary gland in the iris chart. So here the pituitary gland, very, very close to the digestive center. So we have the stomach, and then we have the whole entire, the bowels, and just outside of that transverse colon we have the pituitary gland right next to the pineal gland. So this is going to be of significance when you're looking for signs of sexual health. To me, this would be the first place you would look. So pituitary gland, then of course you're going to look at the actual organs and the organ placements. You're going to be looking for all the usual signs of weaknesses in the iris, such as lacuna, sore spots, discoloration, and things of that nature. And we also have, I think it's interesting, I want to point out that the animation life center, which is also somewhat related to healthy sexuality and especially libido, is very, very close to the pituitary gland. Here we go. And then, so those two probably you'd be looking at together. And as well, because of its proximity to the digestive system, a lot of times you're going to be seeing radii solaris that are coming either from the stomach or the bowels, or both, radiating and affecting the pituitary gland. So digestion, the health of the gut is going to be related to the health of the pituitary and the health of sexuality. Also, just while I'm here, I'm going to note the sex impulse brain center. So you'll also be looking at that. Okay, so back to saw Palmetto. What else can we discern just from, I mean, the berry is larger than, I would say, most berries. It is somewhat oval. The taste of this berry is complicated. I think I've read that it resembles acrid soap. When I have used it in formulas for people, I either use it in a very small proportion if it's like a loose blend, or I will give someone a tincture. And I can speak to this more later, but I do feel like the powder, the saw palmetto berry powder, and the tincture are the preferred ways of taking this plant. And I do think they both have slightly different, at least from what I can discern in my own body, slightly different effects. So I would probably recommend, if you're just starting out with saw palmetto berry, that you either do a capsule or a tincture. Or, like I said, you can blend it. It's a very interesting taste, and unless you're skillfully and artfully blending it with other plants that sort of mask that taste, I'm not recommending that people just drink it in a tea. I don't think that you can. Not happily anyway. All right, so let's go into some of the properties and actions of this plant. I will note that as we've seen the fire qualities and the air qualities, this plant has been given by our herbal forefathers the designation of the planet Mars, so it is related to Mars, which to me is also related to the solar plexus, and that definitely makes sense. It's not, I mean, it's not a hot plant though, and in fact it is somewhat of an anti-inflammatory. So let's take a look at some of the actions. And then we'll also take a look at some of the uses. So what it's been used for, what it can benefit. So to sum up, as a plant that is very much connected to the pituitary gland, anything going on with the pituitary gland may well be affected by taking this plant. And the pituitary gland, in relation to the reproductive system, has a lot to do with sex drive and reproductive activities. Also, it regulates the whole entire glandular system through the hypothalamus. It also has a direct relationship to the ovaries and testes and the hormones that they produce. So this is where you start with any kind of disorders of the reproductive system. And so saw palmetto has a dynamic effect on the entire endocrine system, and it seems to me it activates pituitary functions that cascade throughout the body due to a full system glandular activation and stimulation. It can stimulate and catalyze actions in the body, including increased libido and mood. Saw palmetto seems to work on a high spectrum, affecting etheric functions related to the energetic body as well, as the chakras are the energetic imprint of the glands and create these organs through a stepping down of energy. So that then cascade down through the glands, systems, organs, and throughout the entire body, even affecting in a very real sense physical aspects of sexuality. And saw palmetto is a safe plant. It is considered nutritive, although I have mentioned the interesting taste. It is, according to the animals that live around it, it is a primary food source. And I've only tasted the dried berry. I haven't tasted the fresh berry. I'm guessing with the water content intact, it may be less how it is. So. And then let me read you a couple quotes that I have, and a lot of this is on my website if you want to learn more about saw palmetto. So as mentioned, saw palmetto is native to the sandy soils of the southern U.S. The berries have been used as food and medicine by First Nations dating back to pre-contact times, with archaeological sites showing their importance to Florida's pre-Columbian peoples. Indigenous people of the southern U.S. were using saw palmetto berries for treating testicular atrophy, erectile dysfunction, and prostate inflammation in the early 1700s. So for sure, testicular atrophy, erectile dysfunction, and so for sure the prostate inflammation as well, and very more specifically, I should say, BPH, benign prostatic hyperplasia. And I'll go into that. I have some quotes, but there has been some research done to show that it is just as effective as the widely prescribed medication for this syndrome, BPH. The available data on saw palmetto document the liposterolic extracts possess anti-androgenic activity. So anything that androgens are causing to go wrong in your body, and that's going to be related mostly to hormonal issues. There's a whole list of things that when you have excess androgens, you will be experiencing, and saw palmetto will address that. So anti-androgenic activity and prove beneficial in the treatment of benign prostatic hyperplasia. In addition, the extracts possess anti-inflammatory and immunostimulant activity based on studies. So we have, let's just make a list of the actions of saw palmetto, and that is going to be anti-inflammatory, so I'm just going to put immune. Well, no, I can't. I will put immunostimulant, so stimulates and activates the immune system. And let me just jump right now while I'm at this section to some more of the known properties of saw palmetto. So we have antiseptic. I'm not going to write that because a lot of plants are. Sexual tonic for both men and women. Aphrodisiac. It enhances sexual function and desire. Anti-androgenic. It is somewhat, I've taken this plant a lot, so I don't personally experience it as a strong sedative. I do feel that it is calming, but technically it is a sedative in the nervine category, so it's a nervine. Here we have this connection again with the nervous system and the endocrine system. And healing effects on the prostate gland, works with adrenals to increase neurotransmitters and steroids. So again, because we're talking about the pituitary gland, the actions could almost be difficult to trace because we're talking about the master gland. So what this plant is going to help your body to achieve is more of a balance in terms of hormonal health. So the relationship between the pituitary gland and the ovaries and testes is going to be balanced by this plant. It is a nutritive. So it's not like there are some things for, especially for erectile dysfunction, like yohim. I don't have that on the list. I mean, we could talk about that at some point, but yohim will get the job done for sure, especially if you're looking at that versus prescription drugs. But it's not as safe as saw palmetto, and you have to watch out for some of its side effects. And endocrine gland tonic. Reproductive tonic. It is also, I know, it is also diuretic. And I mentioned anti-inflammatory, lightly sedative, and antiseptic. Somewhat of an expectorant. So those uses are beneficial. They're not the trademark uses for saw palmetto, however. So the trademark uses are testicular atrophy, erectile dysfunction, prostate inflammation, and especially BPH. All right, I'm going to read you a little bit of notes I have on some more of the benefits of this plant. Especially useful for men in over 40. So, and I've read different things in terms of lactation. So with women, I've actually read, and this shows you how different hormones and plants will affect different people. So I've read that it is an anti-galactagogue and that women should not use it during breastfeeding, and then I've read the opposite, where it is a galactagogue. Alright, so did we talk about, I think when I was introducing it, has a special action on the glands of the reproductive system as mammae, ovaries, prostate, testes, etc. And so it is used, and it has documented effects on improving, increasing breast size, and that would be specific to underdeveloped breasts. So we're looking here again at the pituitary gland and the growth hormone, and especially related to secondary sexual characteristics, such as the breast. So if you have underdeveloped breasts and you would like to experiment with this plant, I definitely would try it out. If I were going to do that, I would do it, I would probably include fenugreek as well, and maybe some more progesterone based herbs, but you could try just saw palmetto, and you could even do a direct application to the breast. Like if you had a tincture, you can massage it in and see what happens, or you could take it internally in a safe dosage. I mean, again, like I said, this is a nutritive plant, so even if you take a little bit more than recommended, as a food plant, it should be fine. It is a diuretic, a slight diuretic, so you might notice that effect. Alright, so yeah, and it has shown help for people in gaining weight, improving breast milk supply, promoting calm, expelling mucus. Like I said, it is it is also an expectorant. Okay, let me read you just some of this research about BPH. Historical use of saw palmetto can be traced in the Americas, and the Mayans used it as a tonic for good health, and the Seminoles who took the berries as an expectorant and antiseptic. The palm-like shrub is also native to the southeastern United States, like California, where Native Americans valued the berries for their medicinal benefits, while American settlers later found it useful for treating urinary and prostate problems. Over the last century, saw palmetto has gained in popularity for its ability to relieve swelling of the prostate gland, and is now one of the most popular plant-derived remedies for BPH. This is a common condition that becomes increasingly prevalent in aging men. BPH affects 8% of all men at the age of 40, 60% of men in their 70s, and 90% of men in their 80s. So this is a plant you could start taking. I mean, if you need a plant that's going to improve, like an anti-androgenic, and improve somewhat the function of testosterone in your body. So I'm speaking to like erectile dysfunction and things like that. If you have anything like that and you're in your 20s or 30s, you could use saw palmetto. But for sure, just as a preventative and a nutritive, you could be taking saw palmetto, I would say starting somewhere in your late 30s and definitely in your 40s. And this reminds me, there's one other very important use of saw palmetto, and that is in hair growth. So I would say alopecia, and the kind of alopecia, so hair loss that is related to androgens, which is the most common form of male pattern baldness. All right, so for sure, if you're concerned about your hair, you're losing your hair, whether you're a man or a woman, especially if you're a man and you know it's related to androgens, you would want to try this plant. And in terms of hair loss, and there's plenty of studies on that. I might have a few here, I'm not sure. I would say for hair regrowth, You would do saw palmetto and also nettle. And you would do nettle root, and if you can, in my last video I showed you guys a tincture I had done with nettle flowers and seeds. You can purchase the seeds, but if you try to purchase a tincture that has seeds in it, you may I'm not sure how available that is, but if you're going to use nettle for hair growth, I would use the whole plant if possible, and then definitely this saw palmetto. And then I would also, for hair, I would go ahead and include Heishu Wu. And we can talk about that plant another time, but those would be the top 3 for hair growth. And there have been studies that have shown saw palmetto to help with regrowing and just strengthening hair, prevent, slowing down hair loss, and even I know it's hard, like once you've lost it, especially if you're doing this alongside a detox protocol. That's pretty much all you can do. That's the most you could do for your body to see benefit in that area. All right. Let's see what else I can find here. Male pattern baldness, yes, yes, yes. Enlarged prostate, yes. Let's look at this study. So we have, in the United States, its medicinal uses were first documented in 1879 by Dr. J.B. Reed, a physician in Savannah, Georgia, who published a paper on the medicinal benefits of the herb. Blah, blah, blah. He found the herb useful in treating a wide range of conditions. By its peculiar soothing power on the mucous membrane, it induces sleep. I do find it to be calming. Relieves the most troublesome coughs, promotes expectoration, improves digestion, and increases fat, flesh, and strength. Its sedative and diuretic properties are remarkable, Reed wrote. Considering the great and diversified power of the saw palmetto as a therapeutic agent, it seems strange that it should have so long escaped the notice of the medical profession. Strange, right? Since the 1960s, extensive clinical studies of saw palmetto have been done in Europe. A review of 24 European trials appeared in the November 1998 issue of the Journal of the American Medical Association. The trials involved nearly 3,000 men, some taking saw palmetto, others taking Proscar, which I believe is the main medication for benign prostatic hyperplasia. Others taking Proscar, and a third group taking a placebo. The men that took the saw palmetto had improvement in urinary tract symptoms, improvement in peak urine flow, and improvement in overall urine flow. The results were nearly comparable to the group taking Proscar and superior to the men taking a placebo. There is so much scientific documentation outlining the effectiveness of the herb in treating irritable bladder and urinary problems in men with benign prostate hyperplasia and enlargement of the prostate gland. BPH results in a swelling of the prostate gland that obstructs the urethra. This causes painful urination, reduced urine flow, difficulty starting or stopping the flow, dribbling after urination, more frequent nighttime urination. So yes, this BPH can lead to serious kidney problems if left undiagnosed and left untreated. Okay, so let's see here. So how does that work? We essentially have here another quote from David Hoffman's Medical Herbalism. Saw palmetto tones and strengthens the male reproductive system and is specific for treatment of benign prostatic hyperplasia, BPH. Its primary modern application is to relieve symptoms associated with this common condition, especially difficulties with urination. So here's how it works. BPH is thought to be caused by accumulation of testosterone in the prostate, which, like as we know, is acidic. So we basically have over acidity and probably definitely lymphatic congestion, all the usual culprits in the prostate. And once in the prostate, testosterone is converted into dihydrotestosterone, also known as DHT. Researchers believe that DHT is the compound responsible for the multiplication of prostate cells that results in prostate enlargement. So, saw Palmetto appears to inhibit DHT by blocking the activity of the enzyme 5A reductase. The herb not only inhibits the formation of DHT, but also inhibits DHT binding at cellular receptor binding sites. Okay, so I think that I'm going to read one more quote from David Hoffman, and then that should be sufficient for saw palmetto for now. The eclectic use of this herb went far beyond treatment of BPH. Consider the following from Ellingwood. The direct influence of this agent is exerted upon the ensure reproductive apparatus, especially upon the prostate gland of the male. It is demanded an enlarged prostate with throbbing, aching, dull pain, discharge of prostatic fluid, at times discharge of mucus, etc., dulling aches, weakened sexual activity. Small, underdeveloped mammary glands are much benefited by its continued use. So if you're using it for your breasts, you should be using it in a continued use, you know, throughout your cycles. And I would balance that out with other herbs, which we're going to be talking about in the next couple of videos. Okay, there are no side effects or drug interactions that have been reported. I personally, like I've said, I recommend a tincture. I also really enjoy, I have it in a powder and I will encapsulate that myself. And as mentioned, we're going to go into some formulas at some point. So here we have one formula already for hair loss. I would try saw palmetto, nettle in its full form, and heishu wu. And I think I'm going to leave that there. So in the next video, we are going to be continuing our discussion on these reproductive herbs. I feel like I might want to go straight into chaste tree berry or vitex berry, as it also is connected to the pituitary gland. And so we'll be talking about more about the pituitary gland related to reproductive health and all the different cycles of men's and women's health. So fertility, pregnancy, problems with cycles of menstruation, and then in terms of, you know, just sexual health in terms of libido. We'll be talking about aphrodisiac plants for both men and women. Maybe we can do an aphrodisiac formula in the next video or two. So I'm going to leave that there. Thank you for watching. If you are interested in an herbal compound, so in a personalized formula, you send me your eyes and I create a formula for you. Or if you're interested in any of my tinctures or any of my teas, you can find the link in the description box. And thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Okay, bye.